Okay, so today I want to talk about something that drives me nuts. um, and I want to do this a little differently from how I normally would. Um, I again in a previous video I talked about emotional post-processing. Which, to recap that, um, there's I've noticed in myself a strong tendency towards feeling emotions or feeling some kind of energy arise, and then after it arises, when it comes out, trying to put a barrier or some kind of filter out in front of me in order to adjust it and make it palatable to the other person, or to make it um, uh, to fix the presentation in some sense so that I can control the reaction of the other person. And I'm wanting to lean in the direction of not doing that anymore, because there's a kind of maturing that can happen when I bring the generators of all those energies into dialogue with the world. I don't want to hide from the world on that level. I don't want to create this safe interface in the post-processing way. I want to deal with it at the level of the roots. So that means that I'm going to say some things that are going to be unreasonable and unfair, and I know it. So, yeah, be aware of that. I hope to get to a place at the end of this where I can put all that on in front of me. I feel like I'm sort of taking my guts and putting it on a table and then going to organize it a little bit. And after the organization, I'll clean off the table. That's just how this works. But I don't claim to make each step result in a clean table. That's not what this is for. And that is my tendency. That is very much my tendency, is to try to make sure that each step is palatable, each step is acceptable. I'm going to do my best not to worry about that, aside from offering this bit of warning. Right? So there's a kind of pattern that I have struggled with that it keeps appearing in my life, in my world. It's a lot less than it used to be. But that's not saying a whole lot. Like, I don't know, half of my time when I was in the Bay Area, when I would be standing up in front of a group, or when I would be having conversations with people at parties, something like half of my time would be spent fielding this pattern, dealing with this coming in, when I'm in a teaching role. And the structure roughly goes, I will share something, going, here's a perspective, here's a thing that I think makes sense. It might be challenging to the normal way of talking about whatever this domain is, but like, here's the thing. And then the other person or somebody in the group will object, saying, hey, like the way that you said that isn't, it seems like it has inaccuracies, because here is this bit of theory about some kind of corner of the world. Like the way that you express that has errors in it, and we need to zoom in on the errors. And I'm left with this sense of, I disagree most of the time. Like, occasionally it'll be like, yeah, I screwed up in the use of that metaphor. True. But most of the time there's a sense of, it has some of the attributes of, I have described, I try to describe something about, here's an experience that I commonly hear amongst programmers. And the objection goes something like, hey, I know a programmer who doesn't experience things like that. And here I was trying to use this thing that I have heard a lot of programmers say in order to illustrate something about how the mind works, how the mind seems to work, so one of the functions that it seems to highlight. And I understand that it sounds like a counter-argument, but it really isn't. It really isn't. It doesn't matter to the point that I'm making. And so I try to highlight that. I go, well, I hear what you're saying. I'm sure that you've encountered this exception. Also, it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is about this. It's like I'm trying to highlight something about, hey, because of this thing that crows do, because all the crows are black, there's this experience here, and then somebody objecting, I saw a white crow. And like, I don't care. I'm trying to talk about something about how light interacts with color here, and I'm highlighting something that happens with a lot of crows to illustrate the point. It doesn't matter if you've seen a white crow. So I'll push back here against this thing. I hear you, but that doesn't matter. And then the pushback I get I often takes the structure of something like, hey, but I was reasonable to bring up the white crow. And it's just some sort of thing of like, I can now articulate the pattern a lot more clearly in myself and see what my objection is, which is approximately, fuck you. This isn't about you. This isn't about why you're justified in being able to make it all about you. Fuck you. So there's a lot of frustration because a lot of times I'm trying to convey something that matters to me, and that I imagine, if it were heard clearly, would matter to the listeners as well. But instead, I get caught up in these tangles of not like them not hearing the intent of the message. Instead, they're focusing on the details of how it was said and then trying to nitpick the phrasing. It's like arguing that it shouldn't be pronounced the, it should be pronounced the. I'm like, I don't fucking care. I really don't. Oh, but details matter. Some do. That one doesn't. Oh, here's how it matters in programming, and here's how it matters for language processing, and we have to keep these consistencies because otherwise drift, blah, blah, blah. It's a tool. It's a tool. I'm not going to argue about whether the tool is polished enough to use it to hammer nails in. I don't care. So there's a lot of frustration that is built up in my system around this over years of dealing with the pattern. It takes slightly different forms. The content differs, and so I encountered a version of this a couple of days ago, and there's a part of me that even hurts to use this as an example. But this is what's alive for me here. So that's why I say I'm gonna be a little unfair, and then I'll clean up afterwards. But a couple of days ago, someone replied in one of my videos. I think it was from 2 days ago, where I was talking about, sort of impromptu, here's a history of meaning in the West. I didn't quite mean to make that what I shared, but that's what came out of me, so there we go. And there's actually a lot of embarrassment and discomfort that tries to arise about that because there was a direction I wanted to go in that had to do with my own growth and some of the edges that I'm dealing with. I had meant to give a little context to be able to share that, and instead I focused entirely on the context. There are parts of me that tried to create judgment, and that was actually really useful for me because it was bringing up, this is part of the post-processing control system. Here is the pain that arises from me having avoided the vulnerability of really sharing what's going on for me. Instead, I'm sharing things that I find interesting. That are sort of safe because I know them and I can argue them very in the head. So on one level, there's something of, yeah, I'm accurately perceiving something there. There's something I'm kind of avoiding. On another level, there's an important thing about the way that I'm trying to use shame and guilt internally to apply those controls. That's something that feels much more interesting to grapple with because I could just recognize, oh, yeah, I shared some things that arguably were good to share, but also I'm unclear how much of that was because I was accurately feeling what needed to be shared versus because that was easier. And that lack of clarity is true. I know that I was not clear in myself, and that matters to me. So that's a very simple thing. It's very different for me to look at it and go, damn, I screwed up. And that was the whole reason I'm doing this series. Okay, well, at least I'm getting this awareness of the discomfort because that's part of what I can process. That keeps me from being totally bad. That part doesn't help that much. But anyway, so to me it was unsurprising in a very important way, that as I was giving this whole arc of history, like the relevant part being that uh, as I see it, when science um, came to the fore, one of the movements it made to try to clean up a bunch of the impacts of previous centuries, predominantly from religion, but like there were a bunch of other things going on. But to wipe the slate clean of all of the spiritual and mystical stuff and religious beliefs and belief in God and all of that. This was the European Enlightenment of the 1700s, the thing that gave birth to the United States and the French Revolution, for instance. But much more importantly, the popularity of scientific thinking. There was something that happened there where there was an assertion of a perspective of reality that had no room for meaning. And we didn't discover the consequences of that until the perspective basically won in terms of what was official. So now today we have this scientific materialist paradigm that says everything we experience is coming through a brain that is operating according to laws of nature that don't care about humans. And whether you live or die, whether you love or hate, this is an illusion. And because it's something produced by a brain that's bumping around from molecules, and molecules are operating because of mechanical rules for atoms, etc. And so whether you do good in the world or not, at a very basic level, doesn't matter. And so all mattering and meaning is an epiphenomenon. It's something that emerges from meaningless dust. And even then, dust is something that a brain perceives. It's more like math. But the math doesn't care. The math is just true. Right? So that perspective doesn't allow room for meaning. And the fact that that perspective also took the mantle of authority puts us all in a position where, as a culture, as a society, as a species, we're in this situation where any attempt to make meaning has an active assault against it from the same source that provides us our most powerful technologies. And so that seems very important for creating a lot of context for why a lot of the things I do the way I do, and why a lot of it I know looks crazy. I know there are lots of reasons to argue strongly that it's crazy. And I know those arguments. And there's a part of me that goes, yeah, I've thought through these. I understand them. And there's actually a very reasonable place to stand that deals with the craziness, but still wanders into the territory that's labeled, here there be dragons, but also dragons don't exist. But there are dragons here anyway, so don't go there. That whole paradigm has a kind of schizophrenic relationship to what it means to look at truth. Look at truth, but not that. Don't look at that evidence. That will corrupt you. Okay. How does science work? But anyway, but one of the pushbacks I got, this is like the only comment I think in that entire live stream, was someone saying, hey, I don't think it's fair what you're saying about science because it wasn't just science. Religion is to blame for the reason why people have a God-shaped hole in their hearts to begin with. What science did was remove God. And yeah, that produced a hole, but the reason was it didn't quite give the metaphor this way, but like taking this idea of God and shoving it into the clay of the heart. Like science wasn't responsible for that. Science was responsible for pulling out the figure of God and saying, this makes no sense. I mean, yeah, there's a hole there. That's painful, but not science's fault. So to me, this is a clear example of the pattern that I'm talking about. That wasn't what I was saying. I wasn't blaming science for there being a God-shaped hole in the heart. There's also the fact that even if I was, that is irrelevant to the point I was making. Maybe I was saying that. Maybe I was being unfair. But that means that, like, so I'll give the objections, and then again, there's this part of me that's like, there's part of me that's trying to manage the expression, that's trying to be fair and be reasonable. I actually really like and care about a lot of the things that particular fellow and I have exchanged back and forth. So this is about me, and there's a lot of projection going on here, so this is going to be projecting. There's this frustration that comes out that goes something like, well, I mean, if you know the detail that you want to adjust, then why are you worried about it? You know how to listen to me. You can go, that detail of what I'm hearing in what Michael is saying doesn't quite make sense. So let me account for that. And this is what I wish. Could you please do this? Can you just account for that and hear what I mean? Instead of going, there's a detail here that's wrong. I'm going to fix this. And like, why? 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 Oh, because accuracy matters. Does the accuracy fucking matter here? Does it change anything? Oh, science isn't to blame for the God-shaped hole. Does that change the world we're in? Does that change the fact that Western culture is starving for meaning and science is taking the mantle of, we are the official authority on what meaning is and there is none? It doesn't change a fucking thing. So what does it matter? What does it matter? Right? So there's this frustration that boils up in me that has this sort of incredulity about it. So now in that particular case, the second arc didn't happen, where there's this, like in the past, you go back like 5 years, and I would have gotten in back and forth with people about this, with discussions online about, no, look, here are the details about what I meant, and here's this, and then there'd be an exchange back of saying, well, from what you said, this is why the words that you said suggested that you were blaming science for this, and here is why that was an incorrect thing to say. Like, I would do a lot of stuffing down of the frustration about this. Because the reason I'd get so frustrated is that the focus of the conversation would move from what I'm saying to how I said it. And then we would dig into the details of whether I was justified in how I said what I was saying. When I'm vastly more interested in what I have to say and what wants to come through me. So the reason I'm sharing this, I'm highlighting, like, this has been a challenge for me for years, for like well over a decade, 2 decades maybe. I can actually think of a lot of times in my teens when I was grappling with this pattern. I just didn't consciously register it. I would just get frustrated. So there would be in me this strong wish, can you please just listen generously? Can you please just listen to what matters instead of how it's said? So on one level, I had had a thought sometime in the last 2 years. The last 2 years have been super growthy for me, super focused on growth. And one thought about this whole pattern that appeared to me is, am I listening generously? Some of this is based on almost mechanical faith of like, you get back what you send out. Like, okay, that seems like a plausible thing to me. Like I can see some mechanisms of how that would happen. So how am I putting this out there? And I found that trying to make myself listen generously wasn't working very well. And now I understand a lot better why. And I think I was basically right to ask that question, but I'm sort of zooming in on this and going, oh, here's where I'm creating this pattern. Here's where I am the one doing it to myself. So it all comes back to this thing of, I super want to come up with better language for this someday. It's not been the focus of my attention lately, but I keep wanting to talk about energy, and I mean energy in the way that a lot of mystically inclined folk and spiritual, and when people are in the law of attraction or talking about vibrating energy and sending out vibes, I do mean the same kind of energy. Well, not as all of them. But I'm also acutely aware that energy means something different in physics, and that what I'm talking about when I refer to energy is something that is obviously real in the phenomenological sense. It's obviously real in terms of how experience presents. But that's a different claim from there is something that physics could detect, like there is a stuff moving in the human body. That was one of the main problems that occurred with vitalism. So tempted to go into, here's more history of magic. There was an attempt around the turn of the 20th century to try to hold on to this idea that that life has something special about it that distinguishes it from non-life. And the final push, like this had retreated bit by bit by bit from the establishment of mechanical medical views, the idea of the body as a biological machine. And I think it was in the 1920s, if I remember right, there was a final death blow to the ability for the vitalist view, the view that there is some sort of essence, a life force, a vis vitalis, that would distinguish living things from non-living things. When they have the life force, then they are alive. When they don't anymore. They're not alive. Death is the leaving of this vis vitalis. There's a, I forget exactly what the demonstrations were, something about frog hearts or something like that. But I think it was in the 1920s, the final death blow was given. But the thing is that the reason that this is such a powerful idea is because there is something about how conscious experience interacts with the body that is so obviously true and real, that is not well accounted for in the mechanical view of the body, that there's a knowing that there's something important here. That's why it keeps getting recreated. So when I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about energy at the level of life force, at the level of vis vitalis. It's obviously real. And I don't know how it cashes out in terms of physics, and I don't have to in order to use it and recognize, oh, this is how it works. I can see this is how the structure of consciousness works. Okay. So I'm going to keep using energy. So energy, the word energy. So this always goes so meta. That whole arc, the whole reason I felt the need to do that is because of exactly the thing that I'm trying to talk about. And I want to weed that out. I think everything that I just said may have been valuable to offer, but the reason I offered it came from a place that isn't where I want to come from anymore. This is part of the whole putting my guts out on the table and then reorganizing them. So, one of the big challenges I run into is a habit of self-victimization. And when I say victim here, I'm talking about Karpman's triangle. It's more popularly known as the victim triangle or the drama triangle. This is, so you get, there we go. So the victim triangle has at each of its corners the rescuer pattern. Oh, like you're having difficulty? Let me help you. Right? Which, like, it sounds good, but it is actually playing into the whole pattern of, you poor thing, you can't help yourself. Let me help you. And it's giving an opportunity both for infantilization, treating people like incompetent children. I think treating people like children has this extra connotation that drives me a little crazy, too. Like, why are you treating children like children? But babies need a kind of care that adults don't. Yeah, I notice there's a piece here where I'm a little confused by this, because there's something about how do you respect an infant's sovereignty? And I don't have a clear answer to that one. I'm sure there's a way. But anyway, that's an aside. But treating people like infants, infantilizing. But it also creates space to abandon one's own needs and desires. Oh, I really want to go to this thing, but these people need my help. This rescuer pattern is thick in At least last I checked, it's super thick in the effective altruism communities. Um, the whole the need to do the most good is a matter of, but this is obviously the important thing for me to be doing. Okay, well, if it's the important thing for you to be doing, how about enhancing each person's sovereignty instead of having them need to be saved? You are saving lives. Okay. So why do the lives need saving? This is a type of challenge that that I'm not claiming this is true of all the EAs, but there's a tendency in a lot of rescuer spaces, a lot of activist communities do this too. Arguably, this is the foundation of the juice of activism. Is there is a cause that I'm going to fight against, and I'm going to save people who are undertrodden, and that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to get my meaning. Hey, Carissa. I don't know what you mean by attunement. I agree that what I'm talking about is a lot about attunement, but I'm curious what you mean there. So this, so rescuer, and the thing about abandoning needs, the problem with that is that this often leads to resentment, and this can drop them down to the victim portion. The victim is the other side of, is one of the other sides of the rescuer, which is the one being rescued. Like, oh, these people are doing these terrible things to me. Oh, my situation is awful. My job is terrible, but I have to be in it. I heard a story about. Let me set that aside. Let's just highlight the energies quickly. So, but like victims also resent being infantilized. So lots of resentment all over the place. And then the third corner is perpetrator, I think is the term. Sometimes I hear this as persecutor. But the perpetrator is the one that says, I'm not going to take it anymore. The world is against me, and I'm going to push back against this. And like they often view themselves as being the victims, but they're inflicting, like strike before being hit. And so often when you have the persecutors involved, the persecutors are persecuting victims who are being victimized by the persecutors, but of course the persecutors claim they're victims, and then the rescuers are rescuing victims from the persecutors, and the persecutors feel like it's the rescuers who are victimizing them, and because according to the persecutors, they're the victims and the rescuers are the perpetrators, or anyway, whatever the P word is. So it's just this big mess. It's this big mess, and it's built on this foundation of my source of ability to function is coming from how other people treat me. So I have to manipulate other people in order for me to be okay. That's the whole game. All of the pieces are doing this. Okay, Carissa answers, being fully present to the need, so the needs of the actual infant in the actual moment, and the person, etc. So you're talking about how to honor the sovereignty of an infant. Okay, so attunement is honoring the sovereignty of an infant. Categorizing and treating based on categories lacks attunement and strays to the wrong side of the spectrum from your intention. Yeah, that feels really clear and right to me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Cool. So in myself, I notice a lot of victimization, which is to say there's a victim energy. There's this movement that happens in my belly and heart that tries to come up when I think about this pattern that happens to me. Right? That's a big hint, right? It's a mental way of scanning it, but this thing of ungenerous listening, of nitpicking how I try to express an idea. Like these people keep nitpicking my words, and why can't they just listen? It's the victim pattern. It's me being victimized, right? I want to be clear here because there's something screwy that happens in, like, our culture is largely based on living in the victim triangle. Like, what else do you do? How else can you function? It's got to be that. There's this, I'm telling you, there is a way. There is a way to do something differently. And to a huge extent, like, frankly, if our species could just drop the addiction to being in the victim triangle, we would pull out of this whole global clusterfuck almost immediately. We would grow up. It would be a wonderful world, right? So, like, like just push one button, beep, this like one pattern vanishes. I'll be particularly spicy here and say I don't think if you could look across the world and make one pattern vanish, one energetic tendency, I don't think that it should be anything like racism or sexism or ableism. I don't think it would even be greed or callousness. I think the thing that, like, if you want to make the world good by making one pattern vanish, it's the addiction to the victim triangle. The addiction to victim patterns. And I mean any of the three, the entire space in it, the whole drama cycle. If we could push one button and make that vanish from the human race, we would sort out everything. Claim I. So, unfortunately, we don't have that button, and as far as I can tell, building that button consists of each one of us deciding to root out those energies, not the behaviors. That's the emotional post-processing thing. That's, oh, this arises, but that's victim, so let me not do that and let me do this other thing instead. But the pattern's already there, so it's still going to slip in somehow. So what I'm noticing is, even here, having recognized this, I haven't fully rooted out my being victimized by this pattern in myself. So the thing that I want to be careful of here is when I'm saying I'm being victimized, I don't mean to blame other people. That's part of the victim triangle, right? That's specifically the perpetrator corner. Like, it's your fault. It's your doing. Right? These people are doing it to me, but I have to find a way to deal with it because I'm working on evolving, even though these people are doing it to me. No. There's a fact, which is this pattern is happening. And then there's the question of why. I want to say something like blame implies free will, and people have vastly less free will than we pretend. Free will, the way that we talk about it, there's a deep confusion. There's a really deep confusion about what that means. And I don't mean from a philosophical angle of, hey, within physics, it's all mechanical, so there is no free will. What I mean is what it means to actually make a choice. Like, I've been diving into this really carefully, and I don't understand it. I can feel something that is like real choice. Occasionally, I have made real choices. I've been confronted with the way in which I am making real choices every moment, but they are very different from the kind of thing that we talk about as a culture, about what choices we make. We can't just choose to be nice. There's a reason why we end up being mean to each other. There's a reason why we can't open our hearts. It's not as simple as just choosing to do so. We don't have that kind of free will. The free will acts, the thing that you might want to call free will acts somewhere else. Blame presumes that people can just change their behavior without respect to the energies in them, and therefore feeds into the cycle of trying to encourage emotional post-processing, which causes avoidance of dealing with the energies that are in the body, which allows the whole cycle to perpetuate. Hey Jake, good morning. You say, I can really relate to the rescuer role. It can be hard to identify since it's easy to sell to yourself as a virtue. Maybe that's true of the other roles too. Yeah, so I am so addicted to the rescuer pattern. Almost everything I'm doing in this whole series is, can I please stop rescuing people? There's a place in my heart that sincerely, truly wants to help people, and where I've landed on is, if I actually want to help people, I need to stop trying. That's a paradox. But if I can eat that paradox, then something can happen and other people will live better lives, but also it won't be my business. So like that's been a huge amount of my own struggle. But yeah, a huge amount about how the rescuer pattern arises is with this claim of virtue. This claim of I'm doing good things and I'm being selfless. I can also come with this veneer of blame, like I wish I could do more. I try so hard and all these poor people are suffering and I just want to help them. But it totally misses the part of, do you notice how you're infantilizing those people? You're treating them like they're incapable of living their lives, like they're powerless compared to your massive power. If only you could deal with this incredible difficulty. So that's actually mixing the rescuer and victim roles, because I'm victimized by these difficulties in me, or these difficult circumstances where I only have so many hours in the day to help all of these people, or to fight for this cause. In practice, once somebody enters the drama triangle, they'll bounce around into different roles. There seems to be some tendency for people to prefer to enter the triangle through one of the points. My favorite point to enter is rescuing. I built the Center for Applied Rationality based on looking around the world and going, humans are nuts. I'm going to make them less nuts because they're dumb and I'm smart. That's like CFAR in a nutshell. So I relate a lot to that. And Jake responds, exactly, I've been navigating that exact question. I didn't realize that I was treating them in a way I would be disgusted by if someone did it to me. Yeah, that's the whole game with the drama triangle. That's the whole game. Where we are ignoring the fact that we are creating the very thing that we claim to abhor. And that ignorance is, that's part of the game. That's part of the whole game. And it is a game. There's actually a lot of fun to it. There's a lot of excitement and drama, and it's like we watch dramas. Like, and a lot of dramas are based on the victim triangle. If you remove the victim triangle from a TV show, the problems would get cleared out, and a lot of people would look at it going, well, what's the thing here? It's not true of all action. Like, you look at something like I don't know, like trying to deal with an incoming huge asteroid or comet or whatever. I always get those confused. But some big rock from space going to hit Earth and wipe out the parts of the food chain that we rely on. Like that's like there's a problem. How do we deal with it? Yeah, like the whole, just about everything that we do that's based on entertainment, it doesn't have to be. Like we could have beautiful stories that are post-drama triangle. We totally could, but we have a hard time imagining it. So we're in this pocket of possible dreams, and it's so exciting, isn't it? And the feeling of I'm so victimized and I need a rescuer, and then a rescuer shows up and says, I shall rescue you, and then rescues and then cleans things up, and then the victim can go, oh, thank you so much, but you're treating me like an infant and I hate you for it, but I won't admit that to myself, so that we can so that we can fuck, and then we can have fights later, and then the fights will be dramatic, and then we can have makeup sex, and then we can have more fights, and then break up, and have it be a big drama, and oh, that rescuer became a perpetrator to me. How could I have known? Won't someone rescue me from this huge drama of my life? Then we can repeat the cycle. It's fun, isn't it? It's all bullshit, but isn't it fun? We'll just hope we don't burn down the house while we're playing this game. Yeah. And so in there, I want to catch and highlight the way that I added some barbs, some little Bernie bits into that telling. That's me soaking it in judgment and condemnation in the background at an energetic level. This is part of the edge of my work. I actually am working to root this stuff out, because it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my life. And I can see from a larger perspective how it actually inhibits our species' ability to actually do something better. So that's a major edge for me. How do I release all of my addiction to being in the victim triangle? A lot of it, as far as I can tell, is just awareness. I notice that I am doing it so much less than I used to. It used to be that whenever anybody would point out this pattern to me, I would tense up, and I would start like perpetrating. I would start one of the arguments I used to really lean into in terms of dealing with, no, like we need to deal with aging, is it has a lot of the same structure as I hear from a lot of the louder corners of activism, but also some of the quieter ones too. Um, and to be clear, I don't mean to just say all activism is bad. I mean to say activist culture is fundamentally built on the drama triangle. Okay. And not all subcultures either. I've met some activists who are saying, look, I actually just really care about this situation and I want to know what I can do to help address it. Like that's a different thing. And I've encountered pockets of activist culture that are like that. But that's not where most of the energy and money is. So the energetic branches of activism have a ton of this kind of argumentation pattern, which for me in aging would consist of, no, look, you don't have room to not have an opinion on this because the time it takes us to argue about whether aging is a problem, like we're talking about, well, I forget exactly the math, but it's something like 3 deaths every 2 seconds, roughly speaking, or 3 deaths every 5 seconds, somewhere in that ballpark. So we're talking about an insanely fast rate. So if you delay our manifestation of anti-aging tech by a few seconds, then you have killed someone, right? So I'm adding there that energy of like that's the perpetrator energy. That how dare you, right? So like that's how I used to react, and now I'm watching these patterns dissolve a bit, and I'm still finding them. So there's more to unroot. Okay. See Jake saying, so how do you tell when you're really helping instead of rescuing? Trademark. I love that. I do think I actually care about the people around me, so it's hard to tell where that stops and pathology begins. Yeah. This is a tangent I am happy to go on. I want to emphasize this is something I'm exploring too. I don't have the answer. I have pieces that are obviously true from what I can tell. Like looking at it going, okay, here, that's true. This is true. This I've been confused about. And I'm starting to see a picture form, so I'll share that. But I want to emphasize I'm still working to answer this question. It's a major edge for me. I also feel tremendous compassion and care. Like there's something really important going on here. And I get tangled up because it feels like holding that care sincerely and acting on it it very often slides into me infantilizing the people I am caring for, like they can't take care of themselves. But on the other hand, there's this thing of, well, if I just say, I trust in your sovereignty, you can handle it because I respect you. This doesn't address the fact that sometimes people are stuck. And if I give them some help, they can actually get unstuck. I've felt the clarity of actually answering this paradox. I've seen instances and I have some ideas and sense of how to deal with it, but frankly, I don't know. This is something I'm still working to embody. This is part of rooting out the rescuer pattern in myself, and it's not fully rooted out. But I can say that if there's a very particular feeling that if I am getting something out of it, trying to figure out how to articulate that. I'm now realizing I haven't actually tried to articulate this particular feeling before. Like, okay, so sometimes when my partner and I are talking, and she's sharing with me, yeah, I had this really tough exchange with my mom, and I feel all this tension and there's this struggle that goes on in me because I realized, oh, I get these patterns from my mom, and ow, and I keep blaming myself, and it's really tough. Okay. There's a question of, actually, this reminds me of what Carissa mentioned earlier about attunement. Like, how do you respect an infant while caring for the infant? There's something about feeling into, why is she telling me this? if she's telling it to me from a place of being victimized, this happened to me and mom hurt me this way, then if I feel a tug to try to rescue her, oops. If I feel like, if there's this like, oh, you feel bad? Well, but you're so worthwhile. Like if I'm trying to argue with your feelings, or if there's, oh, let me hold space for you to help you feel better. Like I care about you. Like there's this, like if I'm sort of buying into the invitation to enter the victim triangle because I'm feeling her victimized energy. Right? So at that moment, the thing that I can actually do that is most caring is more like, oh, sounds like you feel done upon by the patterns from your mother. And I have faith in you. I love you. I'll stay in contact and I'm not going to bite. Right? That actually helps. But my goal there isn't ideally, it isn't primarily to help her. It is to stay clean and stay in authentic contact. And it so happens that that helps her. But it's not me helping her. It's me helping myself, me staying clean. And being in loving contact with her, being in intimate, authentic contact at the heart level. Going, oh, it sounds like you're in pain and it sounds like you're wrapped up in it. And that really sucks. And I'm not going to bite into it, but I'll stay here with you. Because I love you and I like being with you. But I'm not going to play that game. Right? Right? That really helps. But again, because I'm actually caring for myself and caring for my own sovereignty and respecting hers, rather than because I'm trying to help her. The help happens through me, it's not from me. Differently, when she's saying that from a non-victimized place, when it's from, I noticed this, and I'm kind of overwhelmed, and I'm feeling a lot of guilt, and that's just where I am, I'm experiencing these things, then for me there's room for intimacy of going, oh, yeah, okay, I feel you there. And that too helps. There's like a meeting. I'm respecting her and I'm trusting her in that, but I'm just meeting her. Okay, there's cleanness, utter cleanness. And the cleaner I can be, the more help comes through me. This is a place where I want to pull metaphorically on, I can't help other people, only God can do that. There's a part of me that wants to manage people's perception, but what I'm trying to do is grab onto, it's like, still, this is such a habit, such a powerful habit, trying to manipulate how people see me. This goes right back to the thing I was mentioning at the beginning. Why do I keep getting stuck in these patterns of people challenging how I said things? Well, it's because I play into it. So I'll just say there is an interpretation of that statement that I think is absolutely true to the heart. I don't help people. God helps people, including God helping me, which I do by helping myself. I won't worry about the paradoxes because there's a clear thing that means. But it also means other people's well-being isn't my business. I can enjoy contact with them. I can care. I can hope something good happens. But their benefit is not my business. It's their business. And I'll respect that to the very best of my ability by me taking care of my business. Me taking care of myself and weeding out the patterns in me that would feed and respond to and get hooked by other people not having done their work. Their work is theirs and my work is mine. And our work is God's. And, let's see, so there's a bit of a backlog here. Let's see, Carissa says, I find that we are all comprised of iterations of ourselves as various children, wanting to be saved by parents when it was appropriate. These behaviors can always, in my mind, be put in context of a time in childhood when the behavior was appropriate. That helps me to take the judgment away. Yeah, that's a beautiful way of saying that. I find myself wanting to add something like, children often lean into patterns that are about manipulating the adults around them into interacting with them, because these patterns get learned super early. Like we're talking at the range of 2 years old, you already see toddlers learning how to manipulate the adults. And that manipulation wouldn't be necessary if that kind of manipulation weren't part of how the adults function with each other and how they orient towards the children. Um, there's a much cleaner version that very quickly um, deals with the physical situation and the biological and experiential realities of, oh, a child is like an infant can't walk, so if the infant wants to go look at something, they need the adult to move them. That's true. But there's also a way for the child to fully embody and own that desire in a way that interacts and dialogues with the adults, which the adults can reflect back. So there's a way to learn this process of giving the child a chance to expand into being a fully functional, autonomous being in a way that holds the grace the whole way through. But that requires that the adults not rescue. I think that's part of what you mean. So I'm just wanting to interject that. All right. So Carissa continues, that helps me take the judgment away. I see adults who are acting out patterns that they see stuck, that they seem stuck in from childhood. A part of them is that child matching with someone who is compatible and similarly not in an appropriate / adult mindset within that dynamic. Yeah, I feel like a lot of this is just choosing to grow up. And it's so easy, even inside of myself, I can feel like choosing to fucking grow up. Oh. Like that, even that is part of the issue. That's part of the inner challenge that I face. Choosing to actually grow up. Yeah. So yeah, strong resonance with what you're saying there. We're all a big bag of children trying to find the right experiences to free us from our patterns so we can grow up on infinite levels. Yeah. And Carissa continues, man, I'm dying over here. I'd love to discuss these topics with you in a podcast / video. Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's connect about that. Okay, let's talk about that over PMs and see what we can coordinate. Jake adds because. Whoops. Suddenly my screen's covered with stuff. So he says, quote unquote, because, quote, I respect your sovereignty because I think you can make it yourself, end quote. Still makes that respect contingent on them doing the thing you want them to do, survive or make it in this case. Respect necessarily requires a willingness to let someone fail. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm gonna like there. Yeah, totally. I absolutely agree. That's one of the places that I keep getting caught. There's something of, okay, you're having difficulty. I'm wanting to help you. Okay, but that's about me trying to get into this coercive dynamic. Let me come into this clear space so that I can actually help you. Yeah, that's part of my own edge. There's still this addiction in me. Yeah, and I absolutely agree. You're nailing the energy there. Absolutely. Carissa adds, manipulation is such a buzzword because we use it so negatively, but it's like neutral and necessary. I totally agree. It looks like that's about a second statement. Okay, so yeah, yeah. Let me slow down for a moment. Yeah, I think the reason I wanted to use the word manipulation there is to apply a kind of emotional punch to it. There's a dishonesty in me about that. So thank you for catching that. There is something that I mean there. Something that I mean that's very clear. I think the basic issue is that I judge the victim triangle, which is part of the perpetrator pattern. That's part of the perpetrator energy. Because there's a difference between going, oh, that's creating pain, and I really don't like that, and I own that I don't like that. And okay, excuse me, that's just true. That's a true emotional response, as opposed to that fucking victim triangle. Like, oh, okay, how dare it be there? So yeah, where that energy is coming from in me is this place of, I really want to see the human race become mature. And there is a part of me that is really terrified. I am scared I am really scared looking around at this world. I'm not sure that we aren't going to literally kill everyone. And that's super hard to sit with because I can see how it's actually not very far for us to make a decision that would be really good and kind. We could wake up. We really could. It's right there. It's right there. It's like watching a toddler having stood up and then trying to wiggle around and trying to take a step. There's something of like it's just one step. You can do it. And combined with that is this fear and desperation in me because I I want to see the coming centuries unfold. I want to see what the human race becomes as we actually embody love. So we actually do it. From a wise point of view, it's so close. But we might instead just kill everyone or burn down civilization, and then I'll die and the people I love will probably die. It's terrifying. And so that desperation gets fed into this thing of, can we please just fucking do the work? Because and that's coming from a desperate desire to make others do the thing. That's echoing with this other side, which is, what is that step? That step is recognizing this work that each one of us has to do. I see that clearly on the global scale. And when I slow down and I pay attention, what that means is, oh, that's, loosely speaking, that's God's work. And my work is to do that in myself. So this is the best that I know how to do in order to create that world. But I'm terrified because what I see is this game that we play into each other. And this is what I mean when I'm trying to point at manipulation. The part of manipulation that I want to add the negative tone to is this mutually coercive thing where I'll play the victim and you can rescue me, and then I can feel victimized by your rescuing and then blame you and perpetrate at you, and then you can feel victimized at me, and then we can perpetrate against each other, and then do this whole thing and then call in another rescuer, and we can keep doing this thing, and then I can go and rescue someone else, and blah 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 blah. But that whole thing is based on this whole coercive tangle. And there I'm slipping in coercive, like this is bad. Well, it's terrifying to me. It feeds the world that kills everyone. And I want it to stop. I really want it to stop. So I think in an important way I'm using that as an aggression internal to myself to threaten the parts of me that are inclined to play that game. So, and that's not how I want to live. So thank you for catching that. I mean something sincere in it, and it requires me to own my fear and my anger and even my hatred. So thank you. Thank you for that invitation. So you had a second part, Carissa, saying, I totally agree, and my child is 4 now. He's capable to learn how to correctly manipulate adults / other humans. Yeah. Cool. I get a thumbs up on Let's Chat. That sounds like fun. Jake says, I actually have a fair bit of sympathy for people in patterns like the victim triangle. What we're trying to do is hard. When you see someone through all the bullshit, when you really see someone in all their suffering, you're affected by that. Our world is saturated in suffering, absolutely soaked in it. It's also so much easier when there's bad guys. You don't have to see bad guys. Yeah. I resonate a lot with that. I used to dive really hard into the Enneagram, which is a spiritually based personality typing system that basically suggests the personality is what you use instead of letting God come through you. And it is your attempt to mimic God's plan for you. instead of letting God enact God's plan for you by going through you. So there's this whole thing of, well, roughly speaking, God has 9 types of plans. So there are 9 types of personality, 9 ways of mimicking the grace of God. It's rarely talked about in such theistic terms, but I think that's something like more honest to its origins. You just have to be careful to think of God as something like agape, as the transcendentness or as reality itself, rather than as the demiurge, which is the usual image that that Western culture now has when we talk about the word God. I don't mean a being who looks over everything and has thoughts and feelings and a personality and is doing things. That's the demiurge. The whole point of God is incomprehensible is trying to gesture at something that is a real spiritual experience, and is a spiritual reality, which is to say it is reality. So the reason I bring up the Enneagram is that there's a part of the teaching of the Enneagram that is about how our personalities use the mind and the heart at a very lower level. They're using facsimiles. There is a higher mind and a higher heart. And at the heart level, there's this bit about the way that we usually experience the lower heart, our habitual heart, the conditioned heart, is with passions, which is like to say emotions. I feel hurt and I'm scared and I'm mad now, and there's this and there's this sort of bouncing around like an emotional ping pong ball aspect to it. But but there's something different when you feel into what is kindness. Kindness is felt in the heart, but it's not an emotion. It's something more like a feeling. It's a frequency. It's an isness. They would make in the Enneagram teachings, they would make a kind of confusing distinction between emotions and feelings. I think this shows up in some other places. And they would say kindness is a feeling. But what they're talking about there is the distinction between something like heart contractions and desperations that are related to shame and the effort to have some kind of relief in being held, but also feeling unworthy, versus the fact of value. Not the thought of value, but the fact, the direct experience of value. So I bring that up because I find that distinction to be a very meaningful one at the experiential level. And at the experiential level, when I see people who, it's not just playing the role of victim. Like there's a difference between somebody who's playing the role of victim and I kind of go, really? You're fine. Right? And versus like somebody who's actually suffering and they're using that as fuel for being victimized. And in both cases, people can end up suffering, but I'm less interested in the epiphenomenal suffering that comes from people playing the victim role, and then the act of playing that hurts, and then their suffering becomes real because they're playing it. But if they were to stop playing it, then the suffering would vanish. There's for me something like, well, I hope you're having fun. I'm not interested. And there's a little bit of sorrow, like, it sucks that you're trapped in that loop. Yep. But there is something very real about like this whole thing. This like the victim triangle. It's like the victim triangle is itself some kind of demonic duke that is inflicted upon the human race, which is totally a victimized way of talking about it. Like feeds into the pattern. But there's this there's something about the real pain, the reality of the pain. It's closely related to the fact that when someone loses a child, that's not about being victimized. That's real. That's real pain. And I feel real compassion at the feeling level, not the emotional level. I can make it about me. Oh, those poor people. Oh, that's so terrible. Oh, I can't stand it. We should do something about it. We should protect these people. Then I'm not even feeling the real sorrow. But risking actually being touched by the tremendous power of grief, that's absolutely real. I have no doubt. And grateful to you for highlighting that. Yeah. And totally, yeah, about the bad guys. Like yeah, I'll just say that. Yep. Jake adds, letting the world's suffering overwhelm you isn't necessary, but you do have to taste it first, and it's bitter soup. Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing. I am there. Carissa adds, disconnection from source. Yeah, I think you were responding to some of the things I was talking about. Well, of course, what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, I think I glanced at that when it popped up and resonated. Jake says, I don't know, that felt more like contempt than sorrow when I received it. Okay. Cool. Then what I want to say is that cool, you're tracking the same thing that I'm trying to point at. Track the real thing. Hello, Kelly. Kelly's my sister. So Kelly says, kindness frequency would work with animals liking some people and not others, and usually being correct. Yeah. Yeah. Back in August, I was talking about bullshit in the sense of a sort of mental pattern whose intention is to disconnect you from truth. Like advertising as opposed to lies. Like it's not exactly lying to show a bunch of sexy people having fun because they're drinking beer. But it's not telling the truth either. It's encouraging disconnection from whether it's true or not, and just creating a positive association with the beer so that you're more likely to buy it. That's bullshit. But there's a thing that I think I was emphasizing that plays an important role here, which is the equivalent of bullshit for the heart. The inclination to disconnect from caring. But I don't mean the displays of caring. I mean, what is actual kindness? What is actual grief? The willingness to feel real feelings rather than getting sucked into emotion. People who are more inclined to do that are plugged into source. They're plugged into the higher feeling center. They're actually sensing what matters. They're not reasoning through it. They're not letting reason get in the way of what they can tell actually matters. And that means, in a very important way, their heart is doing God's work, so to speak. So there's a kind of trustness. Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's really closely correlated with something about how animals pick out whom they're interested in interacting with. Yeah, so animals don't have complex enough minds that they can use their minds to confuse their hearts about what is or is not true. Humans are uniquely crazy in that way, as far as we can tell. As far as I can tell, at least. Cool. So I'm wanting to loop all the way back around to capture something about the beginning of what I was saying here, about this pattern that I've been encouraging in my life. There's actually this thing with Jake is a beautiful example of this, because I actually caught it in real time in this case. So this is part of what I'm excited about, part of why I'm doing these live streams to begin with. So Jake notices, Dano, that felt more like contempt than sorrow when I received it. I'll add this. Jake says, haha, stupid animals can't even victim triangle. Thank you. Okay, so back to what I was just saying there. So earlier when I said Jake saying to know that felt more like contempt than sorrow when I received it. What I received in that message from Jake here, just in that moment, was I don't know, Michael, really felt sort of like you were like faking it, like you were doing contempt there. You weren't really feeling into the real thing, and that was wrong. And I want to emphasize, I'm not actually making a reflective claim about what Jake meant there. I'm talking about what I received, like how my system took it in. And then the immediate thing that booted up is the victim energy of, I
I'm being misunderstood again. There was like a flash of fear, and then this went to the victim engine. And then the victim engine pulled up this energy of ow, and then it tried to slide into the perpetrator thing of you're doing this to me again. Like that's like the big difference between victim, this is being done to me, those terrible people are hurting me, as opposed to those awful people are inflicting on me. That's the difference in energy. Is it cringe or is it attack? Um, so there was this temptation to go into, well, come on, Jake. I mean, if you can tell, then just tell. Like, that isn't what I meant. Like, and I think I was doing a good job anyway. So there's this, and that wouldn't, like, obviously that's not kind. That wouldn't have helped, and it would have had me rolling in this kind of internal distraction. So what I can see now very clearly in myself is the way that leaning into that energy has encouraged other people to join me in the victim triangle, and the way that I invite in that particular dynamic, there are lots of ways that I invite people into the victim triangle. This is not the only one, but this is the one that I am noticing in this context for myself. And the reason why I jumped on this and went, this is a topic I want to dig into, because I noticed myself feeling activated from something a couple of days ago, and this is absurd. It's absurd internally. Like this doesn't make sense in terms of what I want to do and how I want to be. That my challenge like that is going to encourage a defensiveness. So of course people are going to respond with, but I was justified in bringing that forward. And of course I'm going to take that as them being victimized instead of fucking listening to me. Like, okay. Jake is jumping in to say something here. Honestly, I'm not sure. I didn't mean it the way you received it. And I felt a tightness in my stomach after you read it, because I think I was prepping to slip into the victim role when you were persecutor. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's this way where not only as people get to know me, do I end up kind of training them into sort of this implicit dance in the background. Here's how you join me in the victim triangle. But after people get to know me for a while, they sort of know what kind of reaction I'm going to have. And if I'm playing a specific kind of role, they can anticipate based on other people that they've interacted with. So I've been creating this thing, right? I think this is the actual engine. I'm focusing on the victim triangle, but there's actually something much larger than this. But this is an example of what I think the real version of the law of attraction is. The real law of attraction is that whatever kinds of energies, in this sense, in the way that there's an energy in me that creates this victim behavior and rolls into this and then modifies my mind to create these stories and so on. Like the energies that are in me are the ones that I will keep creating circumstances to reinforce in myself. The world I experience is a reflection of the energies inside me. This to me is a very concrete example of that mechanism. So creating real change in my life consists not of trying to manipulate the environment, because where's the energy? And when I say manipulate, in that case, I'm using the origin of the word manipulate, which is like mano, which is hand. The manipulate is to handle, to modify. So in this case, I actually mean it without the negative connotation. To try to massage and adjust and shove and maneuver the world around me, whether literally, physically, or in terms of interacting with other people, saying, you don't have a right to treat me that way, or look, we need to, I'm going to put up this boundary because that's just the practical thing in the world. We need to deal with the situation at hand, and so I have to deal with this. Like all of that is dealing with the reflection of the energies in the body. This is particularly bad if it's, like, when I say bad, what I mean is incapable of creating change, incapable of actually creating meaningful change. When this is done through the emotional post-production, when the energies are there, but then the attempt to change the environment happens through, wait, that isn't the energy I want to put out there. Let me block that and put forward the thing that I think, not down here, but what I think makes sense here. Because then it's not addressing the energies that created the environment in the first place. So, from what I can tell, actually creating change in one's life is, and I do mean this generally. In this case, I am looking at my own experiences and noticing this seems to be true of me. But when I look around the world, this looks like a law. This is a really basic thing about how it is to be a human in this world. It seems like those energies, like the energy of being a victim, or like the energy of kindness, whatever it is that is resonating and creates motivation is what is reflected back. Maybe not immediately, but definitely over time, definitely systematically. And that creating change in the environment requires first addressing this. I can't see the hands below the screen, but addressing the body and the body's resonance. I see Carissa saying, not addressing the energies that created it in the first place. Lack of attunement. Yes, exactly. So, I'm still grappling with this tremendously. Like I've been displaying this whole time. I still have all of these victim triangle energies in me. And I think that's what's been creating this pattern that's been driving me nuts. And including the inclination to try to anger at other people to get them to change. Say, why don't you just, like, I'm trying to show you something that's true. And I mean it. There is something true that I'm pointing at, that I see. That it, like, there's the things that I've been talking about where I'm going, this is something the species needs to change. This is something, like, if we want a better world, this has to happen. Here's what this looks like in terms of individual work. Frankly, I'm right. And I've been using that in service of, like, not entirely, but partially, in service of a way for me to feel victimized by people's misunderstanding what I'm saying because of how I say it. And then me having to say it perfectly, me having to be perfectly clear in order for others to decide to fucking listen. And that energy being the thing that keeps creating this problem for me. So I'm still working on this. Just bringing awareness to it. And then noticing, oh, I'm going to let that pass through me instead of letting it run me anymore. Like, that's a decision I've made. And then I'm still working on the follow-through. It's like pulling weeds from a garden. Like sometimes I miss some roots and then something more sprouts and I go, well, shoot. Okay. So I guess I'm going to keep digging. So, yeah, that's the arc here. I feel like I should have some kind of great button. The term button I picked up from Leah Libresco talking about, and that is why we blah. Thank you, like the kind of doop. And I don't have one here, but I feel like I've said what I came here to say. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for engaging. And this is really relieving for me too, being able to show up here and highlight all this stuff. I knew energetically what I wanted to clear and what I wanted to speak to. And I knew it was going to be messy, particularly to start with. I already feel a lot more breathing room and like there's more space in my body for all of this. So, and in part, it's easier for me when I get these reflections of interaction with people. So thanks for engaging. Jake pops in saying, yeah, breaking out of the game can be hard when everything you do might be another move in the game and will probably be seen as another move in the game by the other players. Chess is a game, therefore I win. Yeah. I want to add something there because this is an idea that had dawned on me like 5 years ago. And I struggled to sort it out. And I think I finally sorted it out. I think I actually have a way of dealing with the core of that puzzle, at least in terms of how I was experiencing it, which is that I was believing my mind that I had to figure out a way out of that paradox. But the paradox is anything the mind does could be in service of one of these games. So how do I tell? Oh, I need to anchor it in something I can really trust. But how do I tell what I can trust? I don't claim that's universal at all. Like in fact, in terms of the Enneagram, that's a pattern of Enneagram type 6. So like it's a very specific type of pattern. So a big way that I found to get around this is to just stop listening to my mind. Like my mind is a tool. It's good at articulating energies. It's good at providing thought experiments and things that I can bounce around in order to find out what the current setup of the energies in my body are. But the energies are what's true. The movement at the somatic level, that's what's real. The thoughts are an after processing thing. So when I look at that, that used to hook me. Oh, like how do I deal with that? But the thing I wasn't noticing is how it would hook me because I would feel fear. That fear would be a particular sensation in my chest. And then there would be this cringe of, oh God, how am I dealing with other people and what did they think of me? But I wouldn't even notice that was what was going on. It would just be fear and then a need to do the thing that would cause reflection that would show that I was sorting this out correctly. I'm not perfect at this, but I'm like, I don't know, 80% of having cleared out that particular issue. And most of it has just been, oh, it feels like something in my chest to have an activation that causes me to worry about this and try to figure it out. My mind doesn't figure this out. Not the conscious computational thing, not the chatterbox. It's way too far down in the internal processing chain, way too far down. So for me, it was noticing, oh, the part of me that knows what is true knows that the energies in my body create the thoughts, and that the thoughts are not to be trusted about the details of the energies. I can instead just look. If I look, then I can sort it out. Exactly what sorting out means, haven't really come up with a great articulation of that yet. It mostly consists of I look at it and then I breathe, often literally. That's part of why here I'll be pausing and of it kind of moves something. I have some guesses about what's going on there, but that cycles right back to how much to believe the thoughts. Okay, I want to move on with the rest of my day. Thank you so much for listening and engaging. And I'll say more tomorrow.